Hello, everyone. These are the attorneys here at Gerber and Holder, and today we're going to talk to you about misconceptions in the workers' compensation case and information that insurance companies tell injured workers that we would highly recommend you do not listen to. And we're going to start off with Natalie. And the first question I'm going to ask Natalie is, a lot of times after somebody is injured on the job, the first thing an adjuster says is, I need to take your recorded statement. And Natalie, what would you tell an injured worker that is told that by an insurance company?
You absolutely do not need to give a recorded statement. There's nothing in the Georgia Workers' Comp Act that requires an injured worker to do so. And I would talk to an attorney before you give a recorded statement. You know, the concern there is that the insurance adjuster may ask you a question that they're not entitled to ask you. They may give information that could hurt your case, or they may try to trick you into offering information that could harm you down the line. So talk to an attorney before you give a recorded statement.
Excellent. Now, Chris, a lot of times an insurance company, after an individual is hurt, and this could be an insurance company or an employer, they will say, you have to go see the company doctor, or we're going to send you to a company doctor. And that is not true. And explain why, Chris.
When you are injured on the job, your employer is supposed to have a panel of physicians posted somewhere in the facility. And if you sustain an injury, you are entitled to pick a doctor of your choice from that list. They are not allowed to control or direct you to any specific doctor on that list. You have 100% right to select a doctor from that list.
All right, excellent. Now, Tom, a lot of times in a workers' compensation case, the employer will tell the injured worker, hey, you did not follow our procedures. And let me give an example of this. If someone, let's say, strains their back on the last hour they're on the job and doesn't report it that day, and the next day reports the injury, the employer will say, you did not follow our procedure, our company's procedure. You therefore cannot bring a workers' compensation claim. What would you tell that injured worker?
The company's procedure doesn't supersede Georgia law on notice. In Georgia, if you are injured on the job, you have to report it within 30 days for it to be acceptable under the law. The only thing I would say is that we've seen numerous times through the years where a person will get hurt and say that he tried to work through the injury, and then a couple of weeks later reports it, and the employer will say that they didn't have any idea that they ever got hurt. So even though you don't have to report it immediately, you should report it as soon as possible if you're having problems.
Now, let's talk about that reporting real quick. Let's just say you tell a coworker that you got hurt on the job, or you tell a supervisor, but you don't fill out a formal report. Is that enough for notice to the employer?
Reporting it to a coworker is not sufficient. Reporting it to any type of supervisor is. I would encourage anybody who talked to a supervisor where nobody filed a written report, either at that time or when you go home that night, to give yourself some notes about when you spoke to the person, even where you were when you spoke to the person, what did you tell him, and just keep that record for yourself, because you will need it at some time, because we've often seen where the supervisors don't remember that they were told about an injury.
Now, Natalie, we have a very interesting issue coming up, and I know you had a case. So how about I'll introduce this by saying, how long do you have to work at a place before you can bring a workers' compensation case? And I'll let you tell everyone your interesting story.
Well, you could work somewhere for 1 minute and get hurt and bring a workers' comp case. There's no time requirement in how long you have to work for your employer. Last year, I represented an employee who was injured while walking into a major department store for her paid orientation to start a new job. I was able to get her workers' comp benefits and also a settlement at the end. So there's absolutely no time requirement.
Excellent. So even if the employer tells you there's a time requirement, you still can bring a claim. Is that correct?
That's exactly right.
Okay. Now, Chris, another misconception that insurance companies place on injured workers is that you have to go back to work after you're receiving workers' compensation benefits. Is that true?
Not necessarily. Okay, in order for you to go back to work, if you are currently receiving workers' compensation benefits and have work restrictions from your authorized treating physician, there are specific procedures that they must follow, and they must get a job description signed off by the doctor. They must give you 10 days notice of the date that they intend for you to return to work. it is a mistake if you are receiving weekly workers' compensation benefits to simply show up for work when your employer tells you that they have light duty for you.
Now, and that's true even if your employer says they're going to fire you if you don't return to work. Is that correct?
That's correct.
And if they fire you, are there any ramifications if they haven't followed the proper procedure?
Well, if they have not followed the proper procedures and they fire you, then they're firing you because of your work-related injury. And they are not in a position to suspend your benefits based off of that termination.
So I'll keep getting a weekly check even if they fire me. Is that correct?
Right.
Next question, Tom. What if the insurance company says to you, well, I know you hurt yourself on the job, but you would hurt that same body part before. We're going to deny the claim because it was a pre-existing injury. Is that true? Can they do that?
Well, they can do whatever they want, but just because you had a pre-existing injury to that same body part doesn't mean that you could not be eligible for workers' compensation benefits. For instance, if you've hurt your back before and you're working and then you hurt your back again and then you can't work, it seems pretty clear that you exacerbated or made your back injury worse. And in that case, you would definitely be eligible for workers' compensation benefits.
So it's worth it to contact an attorney at that point? Because what can an attorney do for you if they're trying to say it's a pre-existing injury?
Well, if they're saying it's a pre-existing injury and you cannot work, I think you would definitely need an attorney at that point because you would need the attorney to help you get some medical care, also be able to work your way through the workers' comp system to see if you're eligible to get certain benefits that have been denied for you.
Okay. Now, Natalie, next question for you. What if an insurance company says to you, I am offering you the full value of your claim? You don't need to talk to an attorney. Trust me, I'm offering you the full value.
Absolutely do not trust the insurance company. That's a major red flag right there. Talk to an attorney about what the full value of your case is. And also that attorney should be able to give you some pointers about if there's ways to increase the value of your case by taking specific actions. Absolutely do not trust them in that regard.
Very fair point. Chris, the biggest issue that we have in some cases is if the employer or the insurance company tells the injured worker, you cannot receive workers' compensation benefits because you were not an employee. You were an independent contractor. What would you tell an injured worker in that instance?
In that instance, I would tell them that they need to talk to an attorney because paying someone under a 1099 or designating them as an independent contractor by not withholding taxes from their paycheck does not mean that they are an independent contractor. I've handled a number of cases where this defense has been raised, and after the facts come out, it was clear that this person was actually an employee. There are specific factors that are used to determine whether someone is actually an independent contractor or an employee. So the fact that you've just been paid by 1099, haven't had taxes withheld, or your employer tells you that you are an independent contractor does not mean that it is so.
So once again, the best advice in that instance, contact an attorney. Tom, a lot of times in a case, an insurance company will say, well, you are entitled to a second opinion or to see a second doctor. Let me help you pick that doctor. What would you tell an individual who is told that by the insurance company?
Well, of course, if the insurance company is trying to direct you to another doctor, I would say that the injured worker has not exercised his right to get a second opinion. You are entitled to have one free switch to another doctor on the panel, and that you can do at any time. The other thing is at one point in the case, you can get an independent medical exam that your insurance company has to pay for. You're allowed to do that one time throughout the case. I would definitely want to talk to an attorney because I think it's very strategic as to when you would use your IME. But if the insurance company is telling you things like that, if they want you to go to see another doctor, then that should not count as your one switch.
Natalie, what if the insurance company tells me that I have to bring a case in a certain state because that was in my contract for employment? Do I have to bring it in that state?
It depends. It's a very fact-specific issue. This comes up a lot for traveling employees or folks in the professions like over-the-road truck drivers. You may actually be able to bring your workers' comp case in multiple states. I would recommend contacting an attorney who can talk to you about which state would be most beneficial for you to bring your state in, and maybe put you in touch with somebody in a different state if necessary. Don't take the insurance company's word for it. You may have options here.
And I'll throw a bonus one in there, and anyone can comment on this. What should you do if the insurance company says, let's handle it amongst ourselves, we don't need an attorney involved in this? Chris, what would you tell someone if the insurance company says you don't need an attorney? Oh, you're on mute, Chris. I'm sorry.
I tell them they would need to talk to an attorney and let the attorney tell them whether they need an attorney or not.
Tom, why do you think insurance companies tell injured workers they do not need an attorney?
Well, obviously, if you don't have an attorney, then everybody who is involved in your workers' compensation case is all working for the other side with a vast amount of experience in workers' compensation law. Most of our clients it's usually just the first time they've ever had a workers' compensation experience. So here they are not knowing all the laws. I mean, we've had some discussion right here about a number of different situations in which it's unclear exactly which way to go. I tell people that if you don't have an attorney in a workers' comp case, it's like trying to buy a house where everybody's representing the person who's trying to sell the house to you. You don't really know the value of the house. You don't know if everybody's telling you the truth and all those things. And the other thing I would just point out is that you may not have an attorney, but I assure you the insurance company has an attorney. So when they say you don't need to have an attorney, and then you don't need to have an attorney, but they have an attorney. So you can take that for what it's worth.
In fact, they probably have an army of attorneys who are advising them on the case.
Of course.
Natalie, Chris, Tom, thank you very much. If anyone has any further questions about workers' compensation, please don't hesitate to contact us here at Gerber and Holder. Thank you.